Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour here at freedomslips.com. I'm Solaris BlueRaven. I'm here with my wonderful guest tonight, Dan Willis. And I just want to give a shout out to Mike Ringley. It's his birthday. I believe it just turned into his birthday. So everybody wish him a happy birthday. That's Nighthawk, and we appreciate everything he does. So have a wonderful birthday, Mike, when you hear us. And Dan, you with me?
I am.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you what, I so enjoy having you on every time you're on the show. It's so informative. And yeah, we were discussing the congressional hearing there and all the censorship and sanitization of everything that they do. And, so do you want to continue on?
Yeah. I was last left off at, there was this media company out of Hollywood wanted me to write an article on media control, being an ex-ABC newsman. I wanted to find out why this was happening, why it wasn't a world-changing event, that happened on May 9th, 2001. And so I was just fascinated to do it for myself. So it seems like how you have to figure this out is put it into a chronology. So I started in the beginning of the 20th century and looked and basing it on my own firsthand experiences, as well as a lot of the witness testimonies and documents and things, and kind of blending it all together to try to form a picture, not to come to an absolute conclusion, but looking at the indicators that kind of paint the picture that's been hidden. And there's definitely a hidden picture that the world has been falsely indoctrinated to believe there's this other reality that we, like in the introduction, that we need gasoline, that we need nuclear, we need rockets that go into space. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so I started to put it together, and it's just like as you dig into this, it's like one oh my god after another. You start. And so what I did is I put it up on thewebmatrix.net. It's kind of like my online notebook that I'm continually updating as I interface with new whistleblowers and witnesses and see how their testimonies fit into the timeline of what has been hidden from the rest of the world. After we were seeking a congressional hearing to bring forth these scientists to prove, that we have these technologies. Of course, the Bush administration denied a congressional hearing. What a surprise. So, we set up a corporation. We had a database of about 300 scientists and inventors around the planet. And I volunteered, since I had a really good I worked for over 13 years in the Naval Electronic Engineering Center and all kinds of satellite and stuff like that. And I was a broadcast engineer for many years, the most powerful FM station. And so I had working with Marcel and all the out-of-the-box stuff. And so I had a good background to look at some of these zero-point energy, out-of-the-vacuum drawing energy devices. And so I went with Professor Ted Loiter, and we were going around the planet, meeting and vetting these technologies. I did this for over 10 years. And one of the first ones we did was down in Dominican Republic, where this crazy Mohawk Indian was French-Canadian that has this little energy device producing about 500 watts with less than 1 watt going into it, powering oscillating fans, these light bulbs, a Caribbean boom blaster. So we were going back down, and it turns out that 2 CIA agents met with him just before we arrived and said to him, if this works, you're dead. So what happened was when we got there, he completely disassembled the entire thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, I can tell you one story after another. We've had one inventor was an incredible Dutch inventor. He wrote several books on the advanced calculus, way over my head, on the theory of electron flow. And he was able to prove it. Well, Rebecca and I, we went to Virginia and set up a temporary laboratory in this apartment complex down the street from Thomas Jefferson's place in Monticello. And we'd have different scientists and stuff come in, and they would go over this theory and substantiate what they would do. And he was able to prove it to me. And he was on the way going to Europe. He had this little shoebox that produced about 240 watts of power. And he was found dead in the airport parking lot, slumped over the wheel. We had another of our team, Eugene Maloff. I was one of a team of like 6 technical advisors. Everybody had multiple PhDs in physics and science except myself. I was just more of a self-taught, out-of-the-box kind of guy. But I volunteered a lot of my time. And Eugene Maloff, he was murdered before releasing information. Many scientists had, come in like with SWAT teams. This one physicist had a crystal that was producing a tremendous amount of energy. They came in and cleaned out his whole laboratory. And he says, "Under what grounds are you taking all my equipment?" And they said, "Well, under trespassing." Like trespassing on the status quo.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Wow, and that was the CIA that did that? I mean, who exactly took all of his stuff?
It appears that the Nazis infiltrated into the CIA back in when along with Project Paperclip and the NASA and everything. They had their assets fully in place. And so it seems one of the mechanisms they used, using under the shield of the national security apparatus, which means that, can't disclose anything, national security,
Right.
So through the U.S. Patent Office, they created this little secret program, because they want to keep the rest of the world using oil and want to keep you thinking we need rockets to go into space. And so what they do is they created what's called the Sensitive Application Warning System, which means that any invention that over unity, even solar cells that are over 28% efficient, room temperature superconductivity, anti-gravity, any of the red flag things that if you're an inventor, and you know what, thousands of these have been issued. They're called national security orders. The inventor gets one of these, and what it says is that your invention has been deemed to be a detriment to the national security of the United States, and therefore you cannot share this with anybody. Anybody you've shared it with, you must have their names and everything. Under penalty of going to prison and everything. So it's well over 5,000 solutions to get off of nuclear, oil, coal, all these dangerous, obsolete technologies have been suppressed in this manner through, in fact, one of the national security orders, one of the scientists gave me, and I made a copy of it. You can see it on thewebmatrix.net and see. And, it seems it's effectively kept these incredible minds, not reverse engineering extraterrestrial stuff, and the stuff that they have in the black projects is light years behind, ahead of these, garage inventors and scientists that are in laboratories and everything. I mean, they've got technologies that are so far in advance. I mean, you can imagine unlimited funding from all their different various sources that they get their funding from, and underground facilities and out in space as well in the secret space program with their anti-gravity craft.
What's interesting, Dan, when you talk about all this, the science behind it, I agree with you. Yeah, they're censoring, they're controlling, they're manipulating, and they're obviously sitting there with a real iron fist. But it also comes to mind is that besides that, there's the consciousness factor of us as we progress into what I call multidimensional beings or avatar consciousness. And that is what they're trying to control, manipulate too. So that's becoming almost a threat to national security. If you get switched on as a very high frequency multidimensional being, and you're able to do phenomenal things with your avatar gifts, that becomes a threat to national security as well. So I think that can dovetail into many things.
Well, they've purposely controlled education. They've purposely done it in such a way, and especially that thing about the power of human consciousness, because as it's being revealed more, like in some of the work with Marcel Vogel, he would take, a few drops of water from a sacred spring that has a really high energy of the structured water, and put it into a big vat of bulk water, unstructured water, in other words. Mm-hmm. And that entire vat everywhere would take on that charge. And you see, when you have structured water, you have that hexagonal structured pattern that is in alignment with the matrix. The matrix, the basic core of the matrix, I believe, is love. And that anything that's other than that is a distortion of that.
Correct.
And so what happens is the power of that, like love is really the only power there is. Everything else is a distortion of that. And when you put the few drops of water, it's kind of like an analogy. You put a couple of drops of the structured water in there. If you were to take structured water of the vat and put a couple of drops of unstructured water, the unstructured does not pattern the structure. In other words, the higher frequency structure trumps the lower.
Makes sense. That's
so
good.
One thing there, since as we are understanding more that each one of us is like a part of a large fractal mind, collective consciousness, and that our agreement of reality collectively forms reality. And they know this. The dark arts, they use Hollywood, and if you look at all the different ways of disaster movies and everybody crime dramas of everybody killing each other with guns, every channel's got somebody with a gun shooting somebody or torturing people. In soap operas, everything's about deceiving, cheating behind people, and it's all this going into the billions of minds on the planet, into the subconscious mind. And it was a media expert by the name of Hal Becker who said, I know the power of creating reality. Just put it on television. What people see on television, they have a tendency to want to recreate in their own life. And it's interesting that China has actually created the separate industry that takes American films and removes a lot of the violence because they believe it to be, quote, a detriment to their society. So there's an incredible power of the subconscious affecting our reality, and what we give our consent to. They want us to see, they can control people through fear and terror, and when and then they knew that back in the very beginning with the OSS and the CIA, they wanted to have full spectrum dominance with the all important application of terror in order to control the masses.
Right.
And if the one thing that they're afraid of, like Brzezinski said, because of the alternative media of the internet and shows like this talking about this kind of stuff, is this global awakening that's happening because people are starting to put the dots together and connect it that we have this incredible power within us, and once we become aware of this power that we have and direct it. In other words, we can give our consent to things or not give our consent to things. And we can actually affect the collective reality by how we envision and see it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's all energy. It can change and transform. There's no doubt about that. Yep. But you're seeing the drama play out from day to day and all the, the formula that they've created, the false matrix. So it's interesting how that's trying to bleed through from regular television
Yeah, it becomes kind of, it's kind of obvious in your face, that there's all this. I call it the kill programming, kill human programming, where everybody's seeing everybody in conflict all the time,
Right.
and this goes back to ancient. Not really ancient, but it go back to the time that the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, infiltrated into the Freemasons, and they had this plan where they were basically going to set up conditions that everybody is fully armed, and then they would fight each other, and they would create these situation provocateur, or false flag, you could call it, and they would profit off it, like from a proxy at a distance. But the key element was they had to have absolute control of the press. And, in 1917 that Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, and Warburg, the one that helped in part write the Federal Reserve in 1913 that, mm-hmm. put us in that situation, they controlled all the major newspapers. They put their own editors in. And today, it's controlled through the Council of Foreign Relations, which is tied in with the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergs and the whole thing, which is kind of interesting. The Bilderberg meetings, started in 1954, about the time we lost control, and that was started by Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was a Nazi SS officer, and all the meetings every year to this present day, they still have
mm-hmm.
these secret meetings.
Right. Yeah. Well, they've been playing out their little game board for a while now, but I think things are starting to turn around. However, I do see people calibrated to more and more violence.
Yeah, it's encouraged, they even, when the Illuminati infiltrated into the Scottish Rite of the Freemason, there was this plan to start the French Revolution. This was like back in the 1776 on May 1st they did that. And then the French Revolution was discovered because they had a courier that's going from Frankfurt to Paris with this whole plan to start the revolution, and a lightning bolt came down and killed the courier, and the Bavarian police saw this and read the book and said, oh my God, these people are dangerous, look what they're trying to do. They warned all of Europe, but unfortunately everybody wasn't paying attention,
mm-hmm.
and so the French Revolution went ahead, and there's the same elements. You keep seeing these different elements come up about the secret societies. Mm-hmm. Even Newt Gingrich, I believe his name is. I mispronounce everything, but he's saying on mainstream media, Fox News, that Trump isn't initiated. He's not a member of the secret societies. So they don't want him in.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently some post with Alex Jones and stuff talking about Hillary being, approved, by them. So we'll see who gets into the office.
It's very, very interesting to watch all that play out. But, they're looping all these programs. That's the problem. You're seeing the repetitiveness of all of these different programs and agendas. They just keep going in circles. There's no progression with this kind of a thing. That's the problem I have. It literally just needs to implode. The whole thing just needs to implode, and we need to reset on a very high level of consciousness. There's no doubt about that. But what comes to mind also is the idea of, I don't believe we're supposed to be here. And I've said this a million times over. I don't believe we're supposed to be on this terraformed rock called Earth. I believe we're supposed to be off planet on another place. And I think that this false matrix has allowed for this type of a stationary kind of stillness that keeps everybody in a stasis, to a point where unless we start moving the energy and recreating the dynamic in consciousness, we're not going to be able to get out of this. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it seems like, according to the secret space program whistleblowers, that there's this energy flux coming in from the central sun of the galaxy
Hmm.
into the section of and maybe we'll get the jump start what we need,
Well,
because I think,
yeah, no, that's true. That's probably the ascension wave because we've talked about that before with DNA activation and ascension from the galactic core. Is that what they're talking about? That's not secret
uh-huh.
space program. That's Ascension 101. That's mystery school teachings. It's kind of interesting though because a lot of those people who are quote unquote connected to that space program tend to mirror a lot of the information that I was exposed to and actually taught. So, you know, go figure, right? We're all off-worlders, Dan. That's the thing. We're not really from here.
Yes, we are all oscillators. It's true. We're
Off-worlders. I call us off-worlders.
off-worlders.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're oscillating
We're not supposed to
off-worlders.
be here. I'm a firm believer we're not supposed to be here. I really believe that. I think that if we were in the right perimeters and the right frequencies all the time without interference and distortion, I think you'd see phenomenal things from everybody.
Well, Solaris, it seems like you and I somehow we signed up for this.
Tell me
It's
that
like,
all the time. I think my ship crashed.
so isn't it amazing? I remember being a little kid, my mom saying, and that was like in the 50s, oh, in the future, we're planning on going to the moon. And I just felt this wave. I also remember it, a wave of disappointment. What? We're just now going to the moon?
And even the moon is a monitoring station, right? What is your take on the moon? I say this all the time. People probably get sick of it, but I always communicate, excuse me, about the moon being towed in, like that it wasn't supposed to be here, and initially it wasn't really here, and it was actually some people say it was brought in through intelligent control, other people say it was towed in. But do you get that? What is your impression of the moon?
Well, it's just kind of interesting how it does its own little weird thing where it's the dark side of the moon is always facing away from Earth. What a perfect place to have operations where people
Mm-hmm.
with telescopes can't see. When I went to Washington, I was in the hotel room in the Hilton with Carl Wolf. He was so nervous to go before this whole thing, and I remember him, giving his testimony, and he actually saw very clear pictures of, dome-shaped buildings and mushrooms and towers, and being very nervous about, breaching security. And then he said, oh, here it is. 30 years ago today, and I hope to hear it on the evening news, but, that was completely sanitized out.
Mm-hmm.
So, according to the whistleblowers, they say, the new whistleblowers, and I'm just kind of like looking cautiously, unless there's a lot of collaborating documentation and, and I realize some of this stuff is really hard to document, but
Right.
I realize at the same time there's people who could be plants that could be disinformation agents,
Mm-hmm.
and throwing the whole thing off, and so when people follow that, and then they say, oh,
Right.
and then all of it's BS,
I agree. Yeah, I kind of question the new whistleblowers too, because my main point is why all of a sudden now? Why did they come out 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago? I've been talking about covert technology since 2004, about the synthetic telepathy. And, I was one of the first people that started to talk about that. And I can tell you point blank now that all these people who claim to be part of the Black Space Program are coming out. And, like you say, unless there's really clear documentation and it can be vetted to some degree, it's really hard to trust people anymore. And you have to realize that there is, with every piece of truth, there's somebody there trying to contaminate it or distort it.
Yeah. It's the CIA has a term for it. It's called DDT,
Mm-hmm.
decoy, distract, trash. For example, the CIA was working with the Weekly World News and all the check stands, at grocery stores where they have, Hillary has an alien baby, and Clinton meets with a ambassador of Mars, and Hitler is helping Saddam Hussein, and all these things they were doing back then. They don't do it now, but when people look at that stuff, they naturally say, hey, what a bunch of ridiculous stuff, aliens and stuff like that. So the decoy causes the mind to trash it. It distracts it from the truth, and then you just naturally trash the whole thing, which effectively does the job of the perception management, keeping it out of people's consciousness. Because once the Pandora's box is opened, like all sorts of things are going to be coming out, and the extraterrestrial UFO topic is key because it opens that Pandora's box and there's just so much information, but they've been doing one hell of a job. All these years with perception management, controlling with Project Dove, entertainment industry, Project Mockingbird, with Operation Mockingbird, rather, with all the mainstream media, and they have the journalists that are supposed to be, independent journalists are coming out saying, I've been a non-official cover for the CIA. The CIA has given me information. It's supposed to look like it's coming from independent sources, So they've created this incredible matrix of perception that has been indoctrinating generation after generation. My father was a career Marine in World War II, protecting Iceland from the Nazis and Korean War, and then I was in the Vietnam War, thanks to LBJ escalating it after Kennedy tried to shut it down, and all these false flag events that have led us into these situations where, it's all a matter of perception management of the masses.
Yeah.
In order to justify, going to these wars, or this is happening and that. And they have, like, the CIA is tied in with Tavistock with, billions and billions of dollars going into, the Tavistock think tanks and stuff that have it down to a fine art of psychologically knowing that when you're watching the evening news, everything is perfectly crafted in such a way that the person reading that teleprompter is getting information. I used to be an ABC newsman. I had to rip off the teletypes of, American Press and United Press International and read the news report. But I had no idea. I was just reading the report. I had no idea who's controlling and how the message is worded from the highest level.
Right.
And now we know, who's controlling it at the highest level. And so, of course, they're wanting to have the perception go in a particular way in order to meet the agenda of those who are orchestrating this false matrix of perception, that they're keeping the entire planet hijacked technologically and spiritually. We could have a whole world that we don't need radiation. We could have everybody could have. I live off grid in the mountains, like you live up in the mountains as well, and God, everybody could just have their own food, have their own power. Have a little anti-gravity craft that you could live in remote areas. People who are starving, they don't have water, and the whole. They want to keep the status quo with the keep the third world countries in the state that they are, while maintaining the power in the United States as the empire. That dishes out whatever it dishes out.
Well, another thing is, Dan, I think that they're trying to actually gut out the United States to a point where they might actually try to make it more third world, just considering what's happening here with all of this invasion. Seriously speaking, I think that they're trying to dumb people down, keep them limited in their evolution. To some degree, I believe that it's going to go globally, and it's very unhealthy. And it's obviously about people who are just so psychotic that they have to be in the illusion of power, and everybody else has to go along for the ride.
Yeah, your main control is in the United States and with the UK and things like that. But they are working on trying to blend it all into one planetary, one world order, new world order, which they are the rulers of. And you have like this police state, which they are, if you want to create a police state, well, you got to put everybody in fear. You don't know who to trust, And they work these things out. But my mother, although she's French, she was born in Buenos Aires. There's this old saying, the devil always forgets to put the lid back on the cookie jar. So you have all these little glitches in the reality that are coming out, and thinking people, who have a curious mind that just don't, just veg out in front of the evening news, that start to look at things and start to question. You start to put it together and you start to see that there is a definite effort to manage the perception on this planet in order to hide these operations. And it extends into science, it extends into archaeology, it extends into history, it extends into everything that creates this this matrix that people can only come to certain conclusions or view things. And this fits in perfect with the Nazi plan that they were. He knew that the industrial might of the United States they couldn't go up against. I think for every plane the Nazis could come up with, the U.S. could build like a dozen of them or so. So they had to work smart, not hard. They had to use qualitative rather than quantitative approach. And so they had this plan to infiltrate, which they effectively did. General Reinhard Gehlen had all the secret Soviet intelligence that Truman was afraid of the Soviets, and so they did a trade-off, and they got 3,000 Nazi spies into the CIA, and so they expanded their infiltration throughout, and now have taken control. The big shift was when Nelson Rockefeller, restructured it. Then we lost complete control of our legal constitutional government. Even Truman said, that the CIA has gone way beyond its original objective and has become, essentially with no oversight and running it on its own.
Yeah, it's rogue. Well, it's a monster out of control. I was going to ask you about, we've touched on Antarctica before, but it's very interesting because that's where the quote unquote New Berlin was, right? Where supposedly, I believe Hitler went to Argentina and then eventually went to Antarctica. Is that what happened?
Yeah, and the DNA on the Soviets rushed the body away, and then they did the DNA, and Hitler escaped. There's much evidence of that. All the intelligence agencies know that, but they couldn't say that. It was like victory, we won, and ticker tape parades. We won over Germany. They couldn't tell him Hitler, and Heinrich Himmler. His doppelganger didn't have the fencing scar on his cheek and other little signs, and he escaped as well. And they all headed down to Antarctica. They had like 3 bases apparently down there, and according to the new whistleblowers, that there was a reptilian race that like. If you look at what Werner von Braun and Dr. Oberth, who was von Braun's mentor, said, we had help from people from other worlds, just straight out, So, and von Braun said it in sort of in a cryptic way, but essentially the same thing. We've come across powers far greater than ours. In other words, this advanced race was giving them a hand, and apparently they did, as Admiral Byrd ran back with his, tail between his legs, and after trying to send down a military armada to defeat the Nazi base down in Antarctica.
Right. So do you think that they received help from these other worlds willingly by these other species? Or do you think that it was something else about perhaps being controlled or manipulated or maybe reverse engineered? Maybe they weren't really authorized to have some of that technology. What do you think?
I think the race that they dealt with aligned with the mentality that they had and their objectives. Because back in 1954, when Eisenhower met with the Nordics up in Edwards Air Force Base with Murdoch back then, they wanted to end suffering on the planet. They wanted to give us incredible technologies and help us with our spiritual evolution. But one of the criteria is that we disable all of our nuclear weapons, and that wasn't agreeable, with the group that had infiltrated. And according to one of our witnesses, General Stephen Lumpkin, who was on Eisenhower's staff. He said that, Eisenhower was aware that he had lost control to the corporations. Now, the corporations, the Nazis had set up 750 corporations at the end of World War II and infiltrated in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Nordics tried to warn them about this other race that was at the time circling around the equator, which they met later on in Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And they were willing to give technology in exchange for what was it called? The Grenada Treaty. For DNA from abduct us and get DNA and help them with a race and everything. I don't know all the details about that, but apparently this group was not as not as friendly. My friend Clifford Stone, who was on the retrieval cases and actually physically interacted with the ETs, and said there was 57 different species that by the time he got in 1989, he believes majority of them are benevolent. That's my belief too.
Right.
I know Dr. Greer has a view that anybody that says there's negative ETs out there is a disinformation sort of thing. I'm kind of reserved of that, but I do believe that there could be lesser, some darker entities out there. But I believe that the majority of them, because you have to think about thousands or millions of years in advance, that they haven't destroyed themselves.
Right.
What's kind of reassuring to me is that the ones that are highly advanced, they are far more benevolent. They're spiritually evolved, and their technology trumps those of the lesser evolved or more negative variety. But I think it's just my belief that. Well, we're having this conversation, so if they wanted to destroy all of us, not to say that they couldn't be doing little devious things in the background or something like that, but I don't really know. All of my ET experiences have always been positive. So
right. I agree with you.
That.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with your spiritual evolution as a person and your states of consciousness and your vibratory rate and frequency insofar as what you attract in the cosmos. But I do believe that, you're right insofar as off-world species. I believe that they're very advanced and to a point where they're the drama that's here is just they don't even know it exists. I mean, they're operating at such a high frequency, they can't interact because they're way too advanced in consciousness. That's my opinion anyway. But I do believe that our higher self, oversoul, superconscious and what we are as multidimensional beings can reach that. That's what we are normally. So what I'm saying here is that we are not supposed to be in this matrix. It's a false matrix. It's a false construct, and it's designed to imprison, entangle, and create distortions. And what we have to do is blow out the distortions, which we do on this show and other shows. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, I've never had a hard time with anything off-world. It's always the covert intel that's caused my misery with the misuse of covert technologies. So, Yeah,
I can only speak from my own experience. That I mean, you hear stories like Phil Snyder was doing underground bases and they dug through, and the ET was firing at them, and there was a little war going on, some reptilian creature or something like that. You have no idea what that whole thing was about, but I don't know. The very fact that if they wanted to attack us, even to the point where we had nuclear weapons in 1945, they've been here for thousands of years, probably way before we even were here. Mm-hmm. In fact, we were probably, seeded by them,
Exactly. Well, we are our ancestors. What's interesting, and this probably deep down, but consciousness can wink this planet out. In other words, I am very, very clear there are species out there that could take out this planet just by conscious intent, if they really wanted to. That's how powerful consciousness is in the cosmos, in my opinion, anyway. And, this is what I mean by the mastering consciousness, but also having the spiritual evolution to know right from wrong. And, but yeah, we have our little toys here, and we have our array systems, and we have all these things, but that's nothing compared to the vastness of the cosmos and the energies associated.
You and I are having this conversation. We're talking about the stuff that we're talking about. And, there's so many other alternative media that are talking very, very similar. And you can actually see as they call the morphogenic fields, 100th monkey, collective consciousness, whatever term you want to call it. But, beside, tuning in on the alternative media on your Android, iPhone, or your computer or whatever, there is also this other level, since we are multidimensional beings, that this awareness is propagating. This awareness is propagating throughout the collective of all human beings, even the beings that are in these secret space programs or under the earth in these underground facilities and everything that are, been trapped there, you could say, in a way. Because once you get into these programs, you can't get out. So that to me is kind of encouraging, because the average person thinks, how do I go up against something like this? It's like they have all the money, they have all the control of the politicians, they control everything. What's little old me going to do? What am I going to do? Go out there and picket in front of like when I was in Washington, Larry Warren, one of the witnesses, he was on the phone to the UK and saying, "Hey Dan, they're picketing out in front of Parliament with signs saying, expose the secret government, release the extraterrestrial technologies." I was so proud of the Brits, doing that. Nobody was out there in the White House or on Capitol Hill or anything with picketing, but they'll just make fun of you. The media, as long as they control the media. And, violence is not the answer, obviously.
Well, what about Area 51, Dan? Why doesn't everybody just go out to Area 51 and say, hey, open up? Why are they going to D.C.? Why don't they just go to the source? Why don't they just go to Area 51?
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's an idea, isn't it, right? Maybe we could picnic there sometime.
Curiously, I was out by Area 51, and actually the little town that's right outside the base called Rachel. The first time Bob Lazar came public, the very first time, it was supposed to be no recordings, no videos, no nothing, right? And it was like a small group, and John Lear was there as well. And, I had the video camera on my lap, though, and I recorded the whole 2 hours. You can see it on the webmatrix.net. We were interviewing, we had about a dozen or so people there that were like hitting with all these questions. And Dr. Greer later in years, he gets this secret classified report from Nellis Air Force Base, which is that oversees Area 51. It was an advisory talking about our group that's there to anybody that's be punished, that interacts with any of these people, and the long distribution list, Magi Ops, Cosmic Ops, all these different programs that I know he presented it to this one general who was the head of the J2 Joints of Intelligence, and the general tried to look into these, and the person answering the phone says, "Yes, we know who you are, General, but I'm sorry, you do not have a need to know." He says, "The hell if I don't. I'm the head of intelligence," and they hung up on him. So there's these little projects that are going on totally outside of our legal constitutional government, and I believe there's a lot of good guys that are in the CIA and the NSA, NRO, military, that some call the white hats, so to speak, versus the black hats, the ones that go along with the cabal, and the other ones that believe in our Constitution and what initially this country stood for. And it's hard for them to do things from the inside. They're really hoping that I believe that a lot of the civilian population wakes up. In fact, several of the whistleblowers, in fact, William Tompkins was even told by the admiral who was running this program that the Navy wants us to come out. Ever since we did the press club in 2001, all the indications are that the Navy wants whistleblowers that come out with this information. So there's this effort from the people that are on the inside that can't really do a whole lot, that are hoping that the people on the outside put the pieces together and start to wake up the rest of the population of what's been perpetrated on humanity, and basically we've been hoodwinked, and
Right.
We've got to, that's the only reason I do these shows, is, just, I'm just one little witness of over 500 witnesses, and I have a very small piece of the big puzzle. But, every voice, everybody is significant. Everybody contributes, because we're all interconnected into this holographic fractal reality that we're all affecting each other. Because you can't affect one part of the hologram without affecting every other part. That's the way it works.
Right. Well, it's definitely a distortion in the hologram right now insofar as what's going on with the turbulence. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very significant to have beings like you. When I call you a being, because you're more than a quote unquote human in the illusion of, just like all of us. But I think it's very important that we stand up and we start really shifting gears and removing these false matrices and actually taking our power back mentally, physically, spiritually, on so many different levels, so that they're not able to control, manipulate anymore. I think we need to really just put the stops on all this stuff, all this false matrix. What's wrong with just having a wonderful, wonderful world to live in, and a peaceful world, and an evolved world, and an ascended world? New Berlin does come to mind, and I kind of wonder what happened to those guys. Did they go off planet? I suspect they went off planet.
Yeah, if you look at, I totally agree. If you look at the people, in Russia and China and Africa and wherever, all over this planet, people just want to have a peaceful, loving, happy life, and it's just, it's almost like the one Nazi during the Nuremberg trials, he said, all you have to do is, create this, like the Rogstad fire. They started the fire and they blamed the communists, and so they started, and it's just say everybody's unpatriotic that doesn't go off to war and do this, because the average guy doesn't want to go off to war. I mean, war is such a hideous, awful thing. I really, my heart goes out to all the veterans and things having to go through the whole things in the Middle East and everything. I saw Vietnam in combat action, and the 58,000 young guys died needlessly. We don't need these wars. We don't need gasoline. We don't need rockets to go into space. All of this has been manipulated, and there's proof. And anybody who, to some people, it can listen to me and sound like, a total lunatic, because they've gotten so indoctrinated into the matrix that, in a way, some of this stuff keeps its own best secrecy because it's so out of the norm from what how we've been indoctrinated.
Right.
And that's how it keeps its secrecy, is because it's so out. But the glitches that start coming in, like what happened at the National Press Club in 2001, inspired a lot of people. Dr. Michael Salla, who I've become friends with, is working on
he's great.
Some of these things. He was inspired by that. Gary McKinnon, while he was smoking pot and hacking into the Space Command, found this list of non-terrestrial officers and ships that are not listed on the Navy, that are out there, that, the Bush administration wanted to put them away for 73 years. They really pissed at this, exposing this list of, non-terrestrial officers, and, all these little leaks, these little glitches that come out. Anybody who starts to, all acts as like a little seed, and once it starts to pry that open, you start to say, well, if that's true, then how about this? And And then you start looking in that, and you start like, oh my God, and look at this. And then you start, and all of a sudden it starts unraveling, and you start to get a larger and larger picture. And you can never say, you've got the absolute, that you're the expert and you've got it all figured out, because it's highly compartmented. And even the people who do know, they're in a part of a compartment that is only partially aware of what's going on. So the compartmentalized security keeps it secret that way.
Right. They keep it kind of fragmented to some degree. And this is where I say, the full Akashic is where truth lies in consciousness, higher consciousness. So wherever there are pieces to the puzzle, each of us take these pieces of the puzzle, we bring it to the plate, but we're able to transcend it and actually work with it because we're working on a higher level of consciousness. And that's really how it works in the cosmos, in my opinion, anyway. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I'd like to invite everybody. 2 years ago, I wrote this visualization. Imagine this. If you go to the webmatrix.net, it's like a visualization of, what's interesting, Solaris, is that the visualization I wrote several years ago basically talked about the history of the world and how this group, infiltrated in and created this matrix of perception. And then what happened was the internet came around and the alternative media, and all of a sudden it gave them a great tool, just like the NSA's, every which way they can, pulling the information, making dossiers on each of us, like William Binney said, a top NSA person. Now it seems that the alternative media of the internet and things, there's this global awakening happening, and now they're like scrambling. They're like afraid that, oh God, it's like... they've created a monster with being able to freely communicate to each other and exchange information. All of a sudden, oh, look at this. This fits with this. And everybody starts bada bing, bada boom. People are starting to put together the true matrix that's been hidden behind this this false perception matrix that they've been desperately trying to maintain for decades, ever since ever since probably the end of World War II.
Right.
Well, it actually goes way further than that, but major steps in actually infiltrating through our entire system and setting up structures to manipulate the perception of the masses.
Totally. Yeah, it's been going on since mankind was pretty much, I don't know, birthed onto the world and the illusion of. But yeah, I could talk to you for hours, and I know at some point in the continuum I'll have to have you back because we only have like 4 or 5 minutes plus or minus here, Dan. But it's such an honor and it's a pleasure always to have you on. You are phenomenal as a being. You are just a wonderful role model for everyone, and you're wise and you're intelligent. And I love Rebecca too. And so I do want to thank you for joining us tonight. And I also give everybody a rundown of how they can contact you and anything you want to promote while we've got a few minutes here.
Oh, we love you too.
Well, they're such beautiful star people.
Okay, the article that I wrote, I'm updating it with all the new secret space program working with Dr. Sala, is at www.thewebmatrix.net. And the research work I did with Dr. Marcel Vogel, with crystals, water, and the interface of consciousness, the Delaware camera, and all that stuff, is at marcelvogel, VOGEL.org. My Facebook is facebook.com/disclosure-witness. And that should give enough people to, if you want to become a friend, I'm open and love to exchange with people. And, hey, we just got to keep this, new perception management rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good information right there. You strike me as a cosmic ambassador. So I think I'm going to start calling you one of those. And I was going to ask you, we've got a few minutes here, plus or minus, but what do you think about CERN these days? I know a lot of people speculate on what they're up to over there. What is your impression of CERN?
The impression of?
CERN, where they're simulating a lot of technologies, and supposedly they're trying to open up a gateway, from what I understand.
Oh, CERN.
Yeah,
CERN.
the Hadron Collider.
Yeah. I don't know, but I saw this thing on YouTube. It's very weird. Looked like a satanic ritual, done in Switzerland. With the welcoming of Lucifer and all this stuff and his dancing and stuff like that. It's I don't know. I haven't really. I haven't had a chance. I've been so busy digging into the new whistleblower testimonies that I haven't spent any research time on that one.
I have a theory about CERN, and I think they have the capability to simulate a black hole. And I also think they have the capability to relocate this planet to another sector in the multiverse. That's my own take. So if they hit the mark the way they want to, I'm not saying they're going to be able to do it. I'm just saying that with that type of technology, I believe it can be done. So that's what I'm looking at.
Well, the Nazis, with the bell and everything else, you can make little black holes. There is actually, according to Kip Thorne, who is an astrophysicist, there's a wormhole above and below the Earth. One's above Alaska, which is interesting, whereas where my UFO, my military secret report was a UFO going out of the ocean, going 7,000 miles per hour straight up into space, and the other one's down in Antarctica. And these natural wormholes, they use them to to relocate throughout the matrix. So
Stargates. Well, we can get out of here then. There you go. We can go.
What was that?
We can leave. That's how we can get off this terraformed rock. If we want to go to another planet. I mean, that's one way, right?
They understand, the dimensional physics. It's interesting that, Bob Lazar was talking about way back in, 91, 93 about the element 115, and it's totally stable. And it wasn't until, 2004 or something that Lawrence Livermore Labs, they discovered it, and it's exactly as he said. So,
right. And Dan, we're out of time here. Darn it, we're going to have you back. I just want to thank you so much, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And please stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dundra and Becky coming up next to sell you on tonight from Down Under. Thanks everybody in chat. Thank you everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you, Solaris. Bye bye.
Bye, Dan.